What's going on, guys? It's Bromley from Empire Barbell, and today we're going to go over Greg Nuckols' 28 program Excel sheet. For those of you who don't know, Greg Nuckols, he runs Stronger by Science, accomplished coach, accomplished lifter, and he has a good academic mind. So he breaks down a lot of peer-reviewed articles and explains them in a way that is really digestible for the layperson. So he does a good job of getting into the nitty-gritty of breaking down a lot of the more obscure principles that make up strength and conditioning and programming in general. So he has this 28 program Excel sheet. It's squat, bench, deadlift programming. Each one has a variation for once, twice, or 3 times a week for beginners, intermediates, and advanced. So for those of you that can do math, 3 cubed, that's 27. He has one extra one for one of the intermediate bench days. Takes it to 28, nice rounded number. So initially I was going to really just cover all those programs in general to see if I could just find some broad principle that he follows and make a blanket recommendation. He puts a ton of information into them. There's a lot of variation. So I decided, okay, I'll just do it by lift. And I was gonna start with the bench program. There's actually too much information for that for one video. So I'm actually gonna do it by frequency. So today we're gonna start with the bench press, 1 day per week progression. We're gonna break down his progression, talk about the changes he makes for intermediates and advanced versus the basic beginner template. And hopefully we can get some insight into how Greg's mind works, but also see some general principles as far as the differences between programming recommendations for beginners versus intermediates and advanced, and get an idea of some really common progression. As time goes on, it's important for you guys to add more of these progressions to your toolbox because you want to have good pattern recognition when it comes to knowing what thresholds, what percentages are appropriate to start a program with, how you should move week to week, what a good rep range is that kind of associates with those percentages, and what kind of pattern of progression is normal and productive and effective. And these are all very predictable. You're gonna see as we go on to his other programs, he pulls a lot of different common progressions and he mixes them a lot. So you'll see something that was common in kind of one school of thought and he'll mix it on an alternate day with something that's given by another coach or is kind of commonly associated with another school of thought. And when you start to see these, you can kind of see their signature on them. And over time, you're gonna get kind of a bigger toolbox of these types of progressions. And it makes it really easy to kind of plug your own work in down the road when you're putting things together on your own. So I think there's a lot of value in that. So starting out, this is the beginner once a week bench press template. It goes off of a 4-week wave. And the idea is you run through it through 4 weeks, you end up with a new 1 rep max, and then you cycle through it again. So starting out, it really hinges primarily off bench pressing as the main work, with some variation of curls, pull-ups, and pull-downs. He gives you some leeway with the accessory for a blanket progression there. Bench pressing, it starts out with 80% for a set to failure, followed by a couple sets of 5 after that. Then it goes to back off sets at 70% for 3 sets of 8 to 10. So we can evaluate this a little more cleanly if we just look at how each percentage range progresses, because there's an obvious pattern there. So we have the heavy work that it starts out. Week 1, it goes 80% for 3 sets. The first set is as many as you can, and then 2 sets of 5. Then we go to 85% for the same thing, but with 3s, and then we go 90% set to failure, and then 2 singles. And then it goes to the back off of work, which progresses in kind of a very similar logical way. 70% for 8s and 10s, 75% for 6 to 8, 80% for 3s to 5. So you see how they both get heavier. The total number of sets stays the same. The reps drop to accommodate the heavier weight. And then you go into your accessory. Now the accessory stuff, I kind of like this because I don't see a lot of people do this. I've done this for a long time with a lot of success. I push it a lot. I call it volumizing. I don't know what the hell anyone else calls it. But he goes from 3 sets of 8 to 4 sets of 8 to 5 sets of 8. There's really not a lot of implication of how the weight changes, and I don't think that's really important with this accessory, but you clearly see that the sets increase. So as time goes on, you adapt to more work, and then you kind of reset on the heaviest week, and there's a lighter kind of recovery week. You hit your number, no real extra work there, and then you reset the cycle. Now, one of the features that makes this a really good beginner program is the fact that your training max resets every week. So every time you do these failure sets, these AMRAPs at the top, he gives very clear instruction on how to change your rep max based on your performance. So if you get 80%, that's about an 8 rep max. So if you do 12, he gives you instructions on how much to add. So next week, your 85% should be more in line with the rep range that he's looking for. Because if your 85% that you're going off of doesn't improve and you've gotten stronger, and beginners get strong very fast, session to session, week to week very often, then these triples you're going to be doing are going to be artificially light, and they're not going to give the stimulus you need to keep growing. So beginners, he's taking into account, they recover a lot faster, they get strong very quick, week to week, and you need to keep the stress increasing at an appropriate rate. So whereas intermediates and advanced are going to progress a lot more slowly, beginners will see these big punctuated surges in performance that require adjustments pretty frequently to make sure that they're working in the right threshold, or else the weight's going to be too light. It's not going to be so strength specific. So that's one of the cool things. He gives this 14-page add-on to the program that details, basically it's an outline of how each program's put together, why it's appropriate. Generally, I would not recommend a once a week program. And that's the first thing that stood out to a beginner. Beginners, if you're only going to really handle the main lift and not a lot of other pressing variations, you can definitely handle more than once a week. And that's common with things like starting strength into the Texas method or strong lifts or whatever you like. And then as soon as I was processing that in my head, I read through the 14-page add-on that Nuckols adds to it. And he specifically says, I recommend 2 to 3 days a week for beginners. The once a week is good if you don't have a lot of time, if you're prioritizing squatting and deadlifting. So he gives a good rationale. And actually, as I went through this thing, a lot of the commentary that I made that I thought was very insightful that I was prepared to offer up today, he already covers in that add-on. So make sure you go to his website. I'll put the link in the description. Don't get it through LiftVault. I first got it through LiftVault, and it's just the Excel sheet. Without any of the really vital information on how to handle the AMRAPs or specific breakdowns of how the phases differ from each other. It adds a ton of value. The programs by itself are okay, but that 14-page add-on adds a ton of value and really makes it a more intuitive program to run. So one of the big differences as you move into the intermediate example of this program is we ditch the sets to failure. So there's no failure set. We just do it as another set across. So instead of a set to failure in 2x5, it just becomes a 3x5. This 85% is a 3x3, the 90% is a 3x1, and then the rest progresses on as written. You also add in tricep specific work and pectoral specific work, some type of tricep extension, some type of fly, in addition to this accessory here. Now, I think one of the main reasons for dropping the failure set is that it's not needed because intermediates are not going to be adjusting their training maxes every week because they can't. They don't improve that fast. There's an implication as you get into intermediate and advanced ranges that hard singular efforts at similar percentages take a lot more out of you. As you train more, you tend to get more condition of volume, but you also get stronger. And the stronger you are, the more a very hard effort is going to impact your recovery. So it could very well be that dropping the failure set is to facilitate a little bit more recovery with the main lift. I think it has more to do with it's not warranted because you're not adjusting your training max. You don't need that as an auto regulation set to figure out how much you should jump your training max up. You're just doing sets across now because an intermediate is an improvement on your 1 rep max every 4 weeks. That's stellar. That's great progress. That's an appropriate amount of progress for an intermediate or advanced lifter. Not so much with the beginner. Beginner's going to increase a lot faster. So I think that's the main reason for that. And then it looks like they're trying to add volume on the back end with extra tricep and pectoral specific work, which if let's say you're coming off this beginner program, you ran through several cycles of it, now that is a variation, that is an increase in stress that is going to allow you to grow, now start to focus on weak points, add some more work, build some more muscle. Going into the advanced phase, everything is exactly the same as the intermediate. Again, not doing the set to failure. Now we're just adding pin presses from the chest, so dead presses or floor presses. And he has this kind of a unique protocol. You work up to a 10 rep max, and then you do a 10x4 every minute on the minute, so for 10 minutes. And then he has some other recommendations for what to do if you don't make it 10 minutes or if you go beyond the 10 minutes, but that gets pretty esoteric. Then the next week you work up to an 8 rep max, and then you do a 10x3 and then a 6 rep and a 10x2. And then on the heaviest week, you just work up to a 3 rep max after you hit your new 1 rep max and bang out your accessory. And that's the long and short of it. So aside from dropping the failure set, going from intermediate and then to advanced, it appears to have the addition of more volume, and then more specifically focused accessory work. This is like very heavy bench specific accessory work. You're spurring growth with more stimulus, more stress, more volume. That appears to be the pattern for this 1 day a week progression. Now, I want to point out that in the separation of beginner, intermediate, advanced, not all of these decisions are inherently beginner or inherently advanced. It seems to be a logical progression based on if you started with something like this and you ran through a few cycles and then wanted to progress and then wanted to keep the same template while still progressing. This is a pattern of adding in some small discrete change off of your main template to keep progress going instead of just jumping to wildly different progressions. Every time you run through a type of progression, you're going to get a better handle on it. You're going to have a better idea of what each week's worth of work means as far as how you can expect to feel in the next week. You get a better handle on where you're at each point. You can make better decisions accordingly. So this is a very logical progression. That doesn't necessarily mean that doing all this with the dead presses at the end and the extra accessory is inherently an advanced program. There are plenty of advanced guys who go a lot more specific to the type of work that they're doing. So they'll do a lot less, let's say bodybuilding accessory, and they might do a lot more benching specific variation. You'll see guys get specific to where they're not doing 10 and 8 rep maxes where all of their heavy accessory is 3 reps or under. So you see a lot of different things across different schools of thought. This isn't like a universally advanced bench program. It's just an advanced progression based off of what he outlined as a basic beginner program. Even if you are an advanced lifter, the amount of volume that you can handle is relative. Powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, bodybuilders, strongmen, they could all be the highest performers in the world, the most advanced lifters in the world, but their tolerance to different thresholds and different volume is going to be wildly different, not just between each other, but between other competitors who train in different systems. So you have to understand it's all relative. A true blue, very specific powerlifter might be able to handle a lot of volume in terms of singles, doubles, and triples, but they're not going to be able to handle volume in terms of 8s, 10s, and 12s. Where conversely, a bodybuilder might be able to handle an astronomical amount of volume, but it's because they trained for so long to acclimate to that type of work. That's what makes them specific. So you might be an advanced lifter. You might even find that jumping straight into the advanced program of doing this progression along with this accessory and then the dead presses on top of all of it might be a bit too much. So the important thing to take away from this is you have a baseline of work, and over time that work increases on itself. And I think that's a very vital point. And I think that's something Nuckols also covers a little bit in his add-on. So it's worth reading. He talks about, he gives little examples on when it might be appropriate for someone to jump into a program and when he would recommend somebody to start with the intermediate and then move to advanced and make sure that they're tempered to it before they start jumping in. Long story short, I really like this protocol. I like that there's a lot of sets. You got 6 sets of bench press. It's a good amount of bench press volume for a beginner, and I mean it works moving down. I mean this would be a lot of sets of benching for me, but again it's all based on what you're used to. If you're used to doing 20 sets of benching, you know, this isn't going to be high volume, but it'll probably be more strength specific than you're used to based on the selection of reps in accordance with the percentage you start with. I like that it starts heavy and it goes into a back off set. This 3 sets across with one of the sets of failure, I use that a lot with the failure set on the back end instead of the first one. Nuckols actually uses that same confirmation in some of his later programs. So the fact that he does set to failure when you're fresh, and then some extra volume on top of that, and then a back off for some higher reps. You're working across a broad range of reps, which is great for beginners. That's gonna help make you more well-rounded. And it progresses in a very even, logical way, going from 80 to 85 to 90, and then a new max, and then you reset, wash, rinse, repeat. These types of very simple, very logical progressions work very well. It's just a matter of figuring out as you advance, what are their limitations, how much can you add in, and what elements do you need to take away? You know, in this example, the failure set gets dropped as you go down because it's likely a little bit too much stress, or it's an unnecessary stressor, and you're better off adding in other things on the back end as you go, because you can always do more bodybuilding work and the recovery systemically is just way easier. So if you can get your pecs to grow, if you can get your triceps to grow, but you're not going to have the systemic beatdown, the CNS beatdown that a lot of work with the compound movement gives you, then that tends to be, I don't know if it's a better way, but it's a very viable way to add in work while still predictably hitting your numbers on the same very simple progression. So I give this a thumbs up. I'm a fan of what I see so far. The next video, we're gonna go into the 2-day-a-week split, and then we'll go into the 3-day so the next video, we're gonna go into the 2-day-a-week split, then we're gonna go into the 3-day-a-week split, which gets a little hairy. That's gonna be a long video. But I look forward to digging into this, and then eventually we get through the squatting and deadlifting. So go ahead and leave your questions and comments in the comment box, or go ahead and start a thread on the forum, empire-forum.com. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley at Empire Barbell. I'll see you.